The Brennan name embarrasses me. My own son said that at his wedding on a yacht in Portland Harbor, 180 guests applauded. His new father-in-law shook his hand, and I sat at a back table behind a pillar, watching. They thought I was finished. A 73-year-old man who fixes boats for a living. But I stood up that night, and what I revealed on that deck turned a wedding into a crime scene. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our story. Please do not forget to like, subscribe, and share in the comments where you are watching from. This story includes fictional elements used to convey meaningful lessons. Any resemblance to real names or settings is purely coincidental. And the purpose is to share ideas we hope you will find valuable. 6 months ago, I thought I knew Ethan Brennan. I thought I understood what mattered to him. Turns out, I did not know anything. Not yet. It was January. Middle of a Portland winter. The rain did not pour. It just hung in the air, settled into your clothes, your skin, your bones. The kind of weather that makes everything feel heavier than it already is. We were on a rented yacht on the Columbia River, docked at a private marina east of the city. 120 feet of polished wood and crystal chandeliers, white flowers, candles behind glass, a live string quartet. 180 seats, and I did not recognize a single face in most of them. I showed up in my good Navy suit. The only one I owned that was not work clothes. Ethan was already there with Sloane, his bride. She looked like she had stepped off a magazine cover. Her father, Dominic Kensington, sat at the head table, like he owned the river itself. The wedding planner found me at the entrance. "Mr. Brennan, you are at table 16. Table 16 was in the back corner behind a decorative pillar. The kind of spot that tells you exactly where you rank. Jonas sat down next to me 20 minutes later. He did not say anything about the table. Just squeezed my shoulder once. That was enough. The ceremony was at 5:30. Sloane walked down the aisle in a dress that cost $18,000. I knew because I had seen the invoice. Ethan stood at the altar in a $6,000 tuxedo. They exchanged vows. Kissed. Everyone stood and applauded. I stayed seated. At 7:30, the speeches began. Dominic went first. "Tonight, we welcome Ethan into the Kensington family. A family built on legacy, on vision, on excellence." Applause. Then Sloane. "The Kensington name has given me everything. I am so grateful Ethan wants to be a part of that." More applause. Then my son took the microphone. He was smiling wider than I had seen in years. "I have an announcement," he said. "As of this morning, I have officially and legally changed my name. I am now Ethan Kensington Brennan. Kensington first, because the Kensington name represents everything I aspire to be." The screen behind him lit up. A legal name change certificate. Official stamps. Signatures. The room erupted. Clapping. Cheering. Sloane kissed him. Dominic stood and shook his hand. Cameras flashed everywhere. I sat at table 16, behind the pillar, watching my son celebrate, erasing me. Jonas looked at me. "Dad," he said quietly. That word still sounded new between us. "Not yet," I said. "Soon." After the music started again, I found Ethan on the outer deck. He was leaning against the railing, smoking. That was new. The Columbia River stretched behind him, black and endless. "Ethan," I said. He turned. Blue smoke over his shoulder. "Dad." "Hey. Great party. Right? You changed your name." "Yeah." He shrugged like we were discussing the weather. "Kensington Brennan. Nice ring to it. You put their name first. Makes sense. Sloane's family is connected. Respected. The Kensington name opens doors that Brennan never could." Something tightened in my chest. "What is wrong with Brennan?" he sighed. The kind of sigh you give a child who will not stop asking questions. "Dad, do not make this a thing. It is just a name. Just a name. Your mother's name." My father's name. He flicked ash over the railing, watched it disappear into the dark water. Exactly. That is why I need something more. Brennan is a shipyard name, Dad. It smells like diesel and rust. When I tell people my last name at client meetings, they look at me like I am there to fix their plumbing. He turned and looked at me, and I saw something I had never seen in my son's eyes before. Not pity, not contempt. Something worse. Indifference. You want the truth? He said. The Brennan name embarrasses me. It makes me feel like I am covered in rust and engine oil. That is who you are, Dad. Not who I want to be. The words hit like a wave you do not see coming. The kind that knocks you under before you know you are drowning. I stepped back. Small, I whispered. Yeah. No shame. Kensington Brennan sounds like someone who belongs in the rooms I want to be in. Brennan alone? That is a man who scrapes barnacles off boats. I wanted to say 100 things. About the 40 years I spent building that name. About starting with nothing but a dead wife's memory and turning it into something real. About his mother, who carried the Brennan name like gold when all we had was rust and each other. But I did not. Because looking at my son in his $6,000 tuxedo, smoking on a yacht I paid for, I realized something. He was not just rejecting the name. He was rejecting me. Everything I was. Everything I had built. Everything his mother and I believed in. Got it, I said. My voice was steady. My hands were not. I walked back through that yacht. Past the chandeliers, the champagne, the laughter. Past table 16. Past Jonas, who stood when he saw my face. I shook my head once. Not now. Down the gangway. Rain on my face. I got in my truck. 22 years old, dented, rust on the wheel wells. The heater rattled. I did not notice. All I heard was his voice. The Brennan name embarrasses me. That is who you are, Dad. Not who I want to be. Something broke inside me that night. Not the kind you fix. The kind that changes you forever. I had given him everything. Private school, university, a waterfront condo in the Pearl District. A monthly allowance so he would never struggle. And this was how he repaid me. By deciding our name was not good enough. I pulled into my driveway in St. John's. Dark house, empty street. I sat there, engine off, rain drumming on the roof, and I knew right then, this was not over. Something was about to change. I could feel it the way you feel, the tide shifting beneath a boat. Slow at first, then all at once. My son wanted to sail into bigger waters. Fine. But he was about to learn something every fisherman's son knows. The ocean does not care how big your boat is. It only cares if you can swim. You want to know who Frank Brennan really is? I am the guy you see at 5 in the morning walking a shipyard in steel-toed boots that have not been new since 2012. The guy with grease under his fingernails at the diner. The guy whose truck smells like diesel and salt water and honest work. But here is what you do not see, and what my son never wanted to see. Most mornings I am up before the sun. 4:45, sometimes earlier. Not because I have to be. I own the company. I do it because that is who I am. That is who I have always been. This particular morning, a Tuesday in July, 6 months before everything fell apart, I pulled into the Brennan Maritime Services yard at 5:15. The place sits along the Willamette River in the St. John's Industrial District. Not pretty. No glass towers or corporate lobbies. Just 12 dry docks. A maintenance bay the size of a warehouse. And the constant sound of metal on metal mixed with river water lapping against concrete. The yard was already alive. Welders firing up torches, crane operators running checks, the smell of acetylene and coffee cutting through the morning fog. Portland fog is its own thing. It rolls off the river like a gray blanket and does not lift until 9 or 10. "Morning, boss," called out Hector, one of my dock supervisors. He had been with me 11 years. Good man. Showed up early. Stayed late. Never once complained about the work. Morning, I said, pulling on my work jacket. Not the fancy kind. The kind with my name stitched on the pocket and oil stains that have become part of the fabric. I walked the yard like I did every morning. Checked the dry docks, inspected the hull of a fishing trawler we were refitting for a company out of Astoria. Asked the guys about their families, their schedules, any equipment issues. This was not management theater. I needed to know. You cannot run a shipyard from behind a desk. The river does not care about your spreadsheets. Mr. Brennan. It was Jonas Park, my lead marine engineer. 29 years old. Quiet. Precise. The kind of person who runs calculations 3 times before he speaks once. He was standing by Dry Dock 7, tablet in hand. Pump system on the Collins vessel is failing again. Seal is corroded. I can patch it, but it will fail in 6 months. Then do not patch it. Replace the whole unit. That is $14,000. And a failed pump at sea is a dead crew. Replace it. Jonas nodded. No argument. He understood. That was the thing about Jonas. He never cut corners, never looked for the easy way. He understood that in this business, shortcuts kill people. I watched him walk back to the dock, already pulling up specs on his tablet. 5 years he had worked for me. 5 years of proving himself every single day. But I will tell you more about Jonas later. His story matters more than you know right now. By 7, I was at Moe's Seafood. Same booth I had sat in for 18 years. Corner spot by the window with a view of the river. Moe saw me walk in before I even reached the door. He was already pouring coffee. Morning, Frank. Morning, Moe. Moe's real name was Morris Gutierrez. 64 years old, born in the Philippines, raised in Portland, owned this diner for 23 years. The place was small, 12 tables, a counter with 8 stools, fishing nets, and old buoys hanging on the walls. It smelled like fried eggs and the ocean. The menu had not changed since 2004, and nobody wanted it to. The usual? Moe asked, even though he already knew. The usual. 2 eggs over easy, sourdough toast, smoked salmon, black coffee. Same breakfast I had eaten since I was 45. The diner was full of working people. Dock workers, tugboat operators, nurses coming off night shifts at the hospital up the hill. Nobody in this room knew I ran a company worth tens of millions. To them I was just Frank, the guy in work boots who smelled like the river. And that was fine by me. A couple of guys at the next table were talking about their foreman. Some corporate hire who had never touched a wrench but made 3 times their salary. They glanced at me. Probably figured I was one of them. I was. Just in a different way. Moe brought my plate. How is Ethan? He asked. Something tightened in my chest. Same spot it always tightened when someone mentioned my son. Getting married soon. That is good. That is good. Moe did not push. After 18 years, he knew when to ask and when to leave it alone. After breakfast, I headed to the office. Not some downtown high-rise with a view of Mount Hood. Just a 2-story building next to the maintenance bay. My office was on the 2nd floor. Small. A window overlooking the dry docks and the river beyond. The desk was my father's. Solid oak, scratched, stained with decades of coffee rings. I had never replaced it. Never would. Ruth Calloway knocked on the open door at 8:30. My CFO. 17 years with me. Sharp as a blade, and twice as reliable. If Ruth looked worried, there was a reason to worry. Today she looked fine. Almost cheerful. Morning, she said, setting down a folder. Monthly numbers. I opened it. Revenue $36.2 million. Employees 240. 12 active dry docks. Profit margins holding at 14%. 3 new contracts pending. We were healthy. More than healthy. Looking good, I said. Ruth smiled. You know, Most CEOs of $36 million companies do not show up smelling like diesel and salt water. I looked down at my hands. Still had grease under my nails from the pump inspection. Most CEOs did not start by sleeping in their own shipyard. She laughed. Quiet. Knowing. After 17 years, Ruth understood. She got it the way very few people did. This company was not just a business. It was a promise I had made a long time ago to someone who was no longer here to see it kept. "When are you going to buy yourself a new truck?" she asked, nodding toward the window. My pickup sat in the lot below. 22 years old. Dented. Rust on the wheel wells. The same truck Ethan refused to be seen in when he turned 16. "That truck still runs," I said. Ruth shook her head, but she was smiling. "One of these days, Frank. One of these days." She left. I sat back in my chair and looked out at the yard. Dry docks full. Cranes swinging. Welders throwing sparks into the morning fog. 240 people out there. People who trusted me. People who counted on me for their paychecks, their health insurance, their kids' futures. I knew most of them by name. Went to their weddings, helped out when times got rough. But my son thought I was just a man who scraped barnacles off boats. He had no idea what I had actually built. No idea what any of this meant. No idea what it cost. And he had no idea what was about to happen. Because while Ethan was busy being embarrassed by his father, something was moving in the dark. Something I had not seen yet. Something that would change everything. Let me take you back. Because before you understand what my son threw away, you need to understand where it came from. And before you judge what I did at that wedding, you need to know what the Brennan name actually means. I was born in 1953 in Astoria, Oregon. If you have never been there, picture a small town at the mouth of the Columbia River, where it meets the Pacific. Fishing boats, canneries. Fog so thick you could lose your hand in front of your face. The kind of place where everybody knows your truck before they know your name. My father, Arthur Brennan, was a commercial fisherman. 41 years on the water. He ran a 36-foot trawler called the Queen Maeve, named after some Irish legend his grandmother used to tell him. Every morning at 3:30, he was on that boat. Every evening at 6, he came home smelling like salt and fish guts and diesel. His hands were cracked and scarred. His back was bent from decades of hauling nets. He never once complained about any of it. My mother, Pearl, worked at the cannery 6 days a week. We lived in a 2-bedroom house that leaked when the storms came in hard, which in Astoria was often. We were poor, but we had something my son never understood. We had pride. We had the knowledge that honest work meant something, that the Brennan name, plain as it was, stood for people who showed up and did the job no matter what. My father used to say something I never forgot. A man's name is the only thing he owns that nobody can repossess. He said that at the kitchen table, eating canned soup, wearing the same flannel shirt he had worn for 3 years. And he meant it. I met Maggie in 1979. She was a nurse at the community clinic in Astoria. 23 years old, red hair that caught the light like copper wire, a laugh that could fill a room. I was 26, working at a boat repair shop, covered in grease most of the time. Most women would not have looked twice at me. Maggie looked 3 times. Our first date was a walk along the waterfront. I could not afford dinner. She did not care. We sat on the dock and watched the fishing boats come in. And she told me about her patients, the old fisherman with bad knees and worse lungs. I told her about engines, about how you could hear when something was wrong before you could see it. She laughed and said that was how she felt about people too. We got married that same year. Small ceremony on the beach. 15 people. Her dress was borrowed from her sister. My suit was rented. The reception was clam chowder and beer in her parents' backyard. It rained the entire time. Nobody cared. It was perfect. Ethan was born in 1991. I held him in the delivery room, this tiny red-faced thing screaming like he was angry at the world for making him show up. And I made a promise. Right there. He would have a better life than mine. He would never know what it felt like to go hungry. Never know the shame of wearing the same shoes until they fell apart. Never wonder if the electricity would still be on when he got home from school. That promise. I kept it. Maybe too well. Maggie died in 2006. Heart condition nobody knew about. One morning she was making breakfast, singing some songs she had heard on the radio. By noon she was on the floor. By 3, she was gone. Ethan was 9 years old. I was 53. The world just stopped. That is the only way I can describe it. One day, you have a wife, a partner, a person who makes the silence feel full. The next day you have an empty chair at the kitchen table and a boy who keeps asking when mom is coming home. I could not move for a week. Just sat on our couch staring at the wall. Ethan stayed with my mother. I was alone in that house with Maggie's coffee mug still in the sink. Her jacket still on the hook by the door. Her scent still on the pillow. My mother came over on the 7th day. Pearl Brennan, 81 years old, 5 feet 2 inches of Irish stubbornness. She did not knock. Just walked in, found me on the couch, and grabbed me by the collar. "Frank," she said. Her voice was hard as the rocks on the Astoria shore. "You have got one choice. Sink or swim. That boy needs his father. Your father worked 40 years on that boat so you could have a chance. Maggie worked every shift so that boy could have a future. And you are going to sit here feeling sorry for yourself?" I did not answer. "Get up," she said. "Get up right now." So I got up. I sold my father's boat. The Queen Maeve. 41 years of Brennan history, sold to a man from Seattle for $63,000. I stood on the dock the morning they took her away, watched the new owner steer her out of Astoria Harbor for the last time. Ethan was beside me, holding my hand. He was small. His jacket was too big. "Are we going to be okay, Dad?" he asked. I squeezed his hand. "Yeah, son. We are going to be more than okay." I took that money and everything Maggie and I had saved. Moved to Portland. Rented a dry dock on the Willamette. The smallest one I could find. Hired 3 guys. Slept in the maintenance bay on a cot for 3 years because I could not afford both rent and payroll. Ethan did his homework on my desk while I made phone calls and wrote invoices by hand. At night, I would tuck a blanket around him on the office couch, then go back to work until 2 in the morning. It was brutal. There were months I was not sure we would make it. Months where one lost contract would have ended everything. But I did not stop. Because I had made a promise. To Maggie. To Ethan. To myself. To the memory of my father and that boat. Over 27 years, the company grew. 1 dry dock became 3. 3 became 7. 7 became 12. I hired good people. Built something that employed families. Something that mattered. And through it all, I gave Ethan everything. Private school. $55,000 a year. With kids whose parents drove cars I could not pronounce the names of. University. $190,000 total. A waterfront condo in the Pearl District when he graduated. $1.2 million. A car. $48,000. Monthly allowance, so he would never struggle. $2,500. Everything I never had. Everything I dreamed for him. But somewhere along the way, my son stopped seeing the man who gave him all of it. He started seeing the grease under my fingernails, the rust on my truck, the shipyard smell on my jacket. He started seeing embarrassment. And he never once saw the boy who stood on that dock holding his father's hand, asking if they were going to be okay. He forgot. Or maybe he just did not want to remember. I gave my son everything I never had. Every opportunity. Every comfort. Every door opened wide. And somewhere along the way, he forgot who opened them. Sloane Kensington was the kind of beautiful that made you forget to think. And my son, unfortunately, stopped thinking the moment he met her. Ethan called me on a Tuesday night, more excited than I had heard him in years. Dad, you are going to love Sloane. She is everything I have been looking for. That should have been my first warning. When a 35-year-old man who has never been serious about anyone suddenly sounds like he has found religion, something is wrong. But I wanted to believe him. That was my mistake. 4 months before the wedding, September, Ethan insisted I meet her. He picked a restaurant in the Pearl District, the kind of place where seafood comes on slate tiles instead of plates, and the waiter describes each dish like he is narrating a documentary. White tablecloths, exposed brick, wine bottles, displayed like museum pieces. I showed up in khakis and a clean button-down. Felt underdressed the second I walked in. Ethan and Sloane were already seated. She saw me first. Her face lit up with a smile, so perfect it looked rehearsed. And it was. Mr. Brennan. She stood. Air kissed both my cheeks, like we were in some European film. Ethan has told me so much about you. Ibetihad. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Jewelry catching the low light every time she moved. Hair styled like she had a professional on call. Next to her, Ethan looked different. Stiffer. Like he was sitting for a portrait instead of having dinner with his father. Dad, he said, standing to shake my hand. Formal. Thanks for coming. Sloane launched into conversation before the menus arrived. Ethan tells me you are in marine maintenance. The way she said it made it sound like I unclogged drains. She tilted her head slightly. A small gesture, but I caught it. The tilt that says I am being polite about something I find beneath me. Boat repair and maritime services, I corrected. I own the company. Oh, of course. Brennan Maritime. She smiled, but her eyes stayed flat. Assessing. It must have been so difficult starting from nothing. That is so authentic. Authentic. The word landed like a stone in still water. The waiter came. Sloane ordered the most expensive thing without glancing at the price. Grilled halibut with truffle butter, lobster bisque, a glass of Sancerre that cost $45. Ethan ordered the same. I got the salmon and water, so tell me about the business, Sloane said, leaning forward. Ethan mentioned you still go to the shipyard every morning. That must be so rewarding at your age. At my age. I was 72. Not dead. I like staying involved, I said. Cannot manage what you do not understand. How quaint, she said. 3 syllables. Each one a knife wrapped in silk. Most men your age would have stepped back by now. You must be exhausted. Translation. You are old, and you should get out of the way. Ethan shifted. Sloane, my dad built a really successful company. Almost 250 employees. Oh, I know. She touched his arm. Possessive. The way you put your hand on something you have already decided belongs to you. It is very impressive for a regional operation. For a regional operation. Like Brennan Maritime was some corner shop barely keeping the lights on. And your family? I asked. Ethan mentioned your father is in business. Her smile brightened. Genuine this time. Oh yes. Shipping logistics. Very established. My father has built relationships with corporations, port authorities, government agencies all along the West Coast. The Kensington name carries a great deal of weight. Sounds important, I said. It is. She sipped her wine. Ethan and I were discussing how our family's businesses might complement each other. Maritime services and shipping logistics. There is real synergy there. Synergy. I hated that word. In my experience, when someone says synergy, they are trying to take something that is not theirs. Ethan jumped in. Partnership opportunities down the line. Modernize Brennan Maritime. Expand into new markets. Ethan tells me everything about the business, Sloane interrupted. How hands-on you are, how you still walk the yard every morning. She paused. It is so charming, charming, authentic, quaint, rewarding. 4 words. 4 little knives. Each one slipped between my ribs so gently. I was supposed to smile and say thank you. I watched her throughout dinner. The way she touched Ethan constantly. Arm, shoulder, hand, marking territory. The way she answered questions I had asked him. The way she steered every conversation back to her family. And Ethan sat there nodding, smiling that tight smile, agreeing with everything. He barely looked at me. At one point I asked Ethan about work. Before he could answer, Sloane cut in. Oh, Ethan is so talented. Completely underutilized. Once we are married, my father has incredible opportunities lined up. Real career advancement. Does he now? I said, looking at Ethan. That right? Sloane's father thinks I have a lot of potential. Potential. Like 20 years of education I had paid for was not enough. Like everything I had given him was a starting point for someone else's plan. The bill came. $320. Sloane did not reach for her purse. Ethan pulled out a credit card, the one I was still paying for. Mr. Brennan, Sloane said as we stood to leave. Thank you so much for dinner. It was lovely getting to know the man who raised Ethan. She tilted her head. That tilt. You must be so proud of how far he has come. How far he has come. Away from me. Away from Brennan. Away from everything I built. I drove home through Portland rain. My gut was twisted. Something was wrong. I could not name it. Could not prove it. But I felt it. The way a fisherman's son feels a storm before the sky changes. The air shifts. The water darkens. And if you have been on the ocean long enough, you know. I picked up the phone and called Henry Tran. 25 years of friendship. My lawyer. But more than that. Someone I trusted with my life. Henry, I need you to look into someone for me. Who? Sloane Kensington. Ethan's fiancé. Henry paused. Frank, you are just being a protective father. Maybe. But something is off. The way she talks about the business, about Ethan, about me. She is not trying to impress me, Henry. She is sizing me up. I will ask around. Yeah, do that. I hung up and sat in my truck in the driveway, rain on the windshield. I thought about Sloane's smile, her calculated compliments, her flat eyes that never matched her mouth. In my experience, when someone's eyes do not match their smile, you are not talking to a person. You are talking to a plan. That night, driving through Portland rain, I could not name what was wrong. But I felt it the way a fisherman feels a storm before it hits. Something bad was coming. And it was wearing a designer dress. While my son was ashamed of me, there was a young man who understood what the Brennan name actually meant. His name was Jonas Park. And he owed me his life. But the truth is, by the time this story ends, I would owe him mine. Let me tell you how I met Jonas. 5 years before the wedding, on a Thursday evening in October, I was closing up the yard. Most of the crew had gone home. The sun was dropping behind the West Hills, turning the Willamette that copper color it gets in autumn. I was walking the docks one last time when I heard it. A sound that does not belong on calm water. Metal scraping. Then a splash. Then silence. I ran to the end of the pier. 40 yards out, a small utility boat was listing hard to starboard. The hull was cracked. Water pouring in. And in the water, a young man. Face down. Not moving. I did not think. I kicked off my boots and went in. The Willamette in October is cold enough to stop your breath. I reached him, in maybe 30 seconds. Grabbed his collar. Flipped him over. He was unconscious. Blood on his forehead from where he had hit the gunwale going over. I dragged him back to the dock. Pulled him up. Pressed on his chest until he coughed up river water and opened his eyes. He looked at me. Confused. Terrified. Young. So young. You are okay, I said. You are okay, son. That was the first time I called Jonas Park son. It would not be the last. His name was Jonas Park, 24 years old. Just graduated with a marine engineering degree from Oregon State. He had been doing freelance inspection work on the river, using a borrowed boat that should have been retired years ago. No one else was on the water that evening. If I had left 5 minutes earlier, he would have drowned. Over coffee in my office that night, while Jonas sat wrapped in a blanket shivering, he told me his story. And it broke something inside me. Jonas was born in Ansan, South Korea. In 2014, when he was 14 years old, his family boarded a ferry called the Sewol for a trip to Jeju Island. His mother, his father, his 11-year-old sister, Yuna. Jonas was supposed to go. He had a fever that morning. His mother told him to stay with his aunt. "We will bring you back something beautiful," she said. That was the last thing she ever told him. The Sewol capsized. 304 people died. His mother, his father, his sister, all three. Gone. Swallowed by the ocean, in a disaster that should never have happened. Jonas's aunt brought him to Portland 6 months later. He grew up in a small apartment in Southeast, went to public school, barely spoke for 2 years. When he finally started talking again, he said he wanted to understand boats, wanted to understand how something that was supposed to carry people safely could fail so completely. So he studied marine engineering, graduated top of his class, and ended up in the Willamette River on a Thursday evening with a cracked hull and no one around, except me. I offered him a job the next week. Started him as a maintenance assistant. Basic work. Cleaning dry docks, organizing parts, learning the systems from the ground up. He did not complain, did not ask for shortcuts, showed up at 5 every morning, stayed until the work was done. Within a year, he was running diagnostics on hull integrity systems that engineers twice his age could not figure out. By year 3, he was my lead inspector. By year 5, he was my chief marine engineer, the best I had ever had. Jonas never forgot where he came from. Never forgot what the ocean had taken from him. And he never forgot who pulled him out of the water when no one else was there. That was the difference between Jonas and Ethan. Jonas had lost everything and rebuilt himself from nothing. Ethan had been given everything and still wanted more. Jonas understood gratitude. Ethan understood entitlement. And that gap between them was about to become the most important thing in my life. Now. The reason I am telling you about Jonas right now is not just because of who he was. It is because of what he found. It was mid-October. 3 weeks after that dinner with Sloan, I was in my office reviewing contracts when Jonas knocked on the door. He had his tablet in one hand and a printout in the other. His face was calm, but his eyes were not. After 5 years, I could read Jonas the way I read weather on the water. Something was wrong. "Boss," he said, "I need to show you something." He sat down and pulled up the access logs for our dry docks. Every lock in the Brennan Maritime Yard ran on an electronic system. Key cards, timestamps, everything recorded. 3 of our dry docks were accessed between 1 and 3 in the morning. Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday nights. For the past 6 weeks, he turned the tablet toward me. Dock 4, Dock 7, and Dock 11. I looked at the logs. Timestamps glowing on the screen. 1:14 in the morning. 1:47. 2:23. Repeated pattern. Same docks. Same hours. "Who?" I asked. "That is the problem." Jonas pulled up another screen. "The access code used is a master override. There are only 2 people in this company with that code." He paused, looked at me. "You and Ethan." The room got very quiet. I could hear the river through the window, the hum of the dock, lights outside. I checked the security cameras. Jonas continued. "Someone disabled them on those nights. Manually. From inside the system. What was in those docks on those nights?" I pulled the inventory logs. Nothing was scheduled. But I went down to Dock 7 this morning at 4:30. Jonas hesitated. There were marks on the floor. Cargo marks. Heavy containers. Something was being loaded or unloaded off the books. And whoever did it had your master code. I sat back. My chair creaked. The same chair I had sat in for 27 years. The same desk my father never had. Someone was using my shipyard. My boats. My name. And there was only one person besides me who had the keys to every lock in that yard. My son. Boss. Jonas said quietly. What do you want to do? I stared at those access logs. 1:14 in the morning. 1:47. 2:23. 6 weeks of someone moving in the dark through my yard while I slept. Nothing yet, I said. But keep digging. And Jonas. Do not tell anyone. He nodded. Stood up. Stopped at the door. Boss. Whatever this is, I am with you. I looked at him. This young man who had lost his family on the water and found a new one on the water. Who understood loyalty not because someone taught him, but because he had learned what it costs to lose it. I know you are, I said. He left. I sat there alone, staring at the screen. My son's access code. My docks. My boats. Used in the middle of the night for something that was not in any log I had ever signed. Someone had the codes. Someone inside. And there was only one person besides me who had full access to every lock in that shipyard. My son. Ruth Calloway walked into my office carrying a folder. After 17 years, I knew her expressions like weather patterns. Clear skies meant good numbers. Overcast meant a client problem. This one was a hurricane. It was a Tuesday evening, late October. The yard was empty. Just Ruth and me. The overhead lights hummed in the silence. Through the window I could see the Willamette moving slow and dark under the last gray light. Ruth sat down across from me and placed the folder on my desk like it was something fragile. Something dangerous. Frank, she said quietly. This is bad. Really bad. I had asked Ruth to look into the Kensingtons 2 weeks ago. Quietly. After Jonas showed me the access logs. After that dinner with Sloane, where every compliment was a weapon, I needed to know who my son was marrying into. Ruth had contacts everywhere. Accountants, investigators, people who knew how to pull threads without being seen. She had pulled a lot of threads. Where do you want me to start? She asked. The beginning. Ruth took a breath and opened the folder. Financial records, federal documents, printed emails, bank statements. The kind of paperwork that ends careers and starts prison sentences. Kensington Shipping, she said. The company Dominic Kensington runs. It is not what it seems. She pulled out a federal memo. They have been under investigation for 10 months. Started last January. Dominic is facing serious federal charges. My stomach went cold. For what? Smuggling through West Coast ports. Customs fraud. Money laundering. Using legitimate shipping routes to move undeclared cargo. The federal prosecutors have been building a case for almost a year. She looked at me across the desk. Frank, they are not shipping consultants. They are criminals using a legitimate business as a front. I stared at the document. Federal seal at the top. Dominic Kensington's name highlighted. The same man who had sat at the head table at the engagement party like he owned the world. And Sloane? I asked. Ruth pulled out credit reports and bank statements. Personal debt of $87,000. Credit cards maxed. Personal loans. She is living way beyond what she earns. She paused. And this is not her first time. I found 2 other men in the past 4 years. Both wealthy. Both relationships ended when they figured out what she was doing. A professional, I said. Exactly. But it gets worse. Ruth showed me the emails. Exchanges between Sloane and Dominic. Between Sloane and Ethan. Some I had to read twice because I could not believe what I was seeing. They are planning a merger, Ruth said. Kensington Shipping with Brennan Maritime. The paperwork is already being drafted. Once Ethan marries into the family, they push for it. Make it look natural. Two family businesses coming together. And when the feds come, Ruth's expression darkened. When the federal investigation lands, all the liability transfers to Brennan Maritime. The smuggling charges, the fines, the criminal exposure. We become the ones holding the bag. Dominic and Sloane walk away clean, claim they were deceived. You go to prison. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. They are framing us. Worse. They are planning to claim you knew about everything. That you were complicit. And Ethan? The word came out hollow. Like saying the name of someone who had already died. Ruth hesitated. Then she pulled out another set of printouts. Her hand was not quite steady. Frank. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Ethan knows. What? He is part of it. These are from his email account. She slid them across the desk. I picked up the first one. Ethan's name at the top. Sent to Sloane 6 weeks ago. The same 6 weeks, Jonas had tracked the midnight access logs. Dad will not suspect a thing. He trusts me. When we are married, we move forward with the merger. He will sign whatever we put in front of him. My hands started shaking. I set the paper down because I did not trust myself to hold it. Ruth showed me another one. 2 months back. He is just a boat mechanic who got lucky. He does not understand business. Handling him is easy. I read that line 3 times. A boat mechanic who got lucky. Handling him is easy. My son wrote those words. About me. About the man who pulled him out of poverty. Who slept on a cot in a shipyard for 3 years so his boy could have a bed. Who sold his father's boat so his son could have a future. Ruth continued. There is more. In another thread, Ethan discusses selling Brennan Maritime after the merger goes through. Projected sale price. $350 million. Split between him, Sloane, and Dominic. You get nothing. Or you are in prison, so it does not matter. I could not move. Could not speak. The office was silent, except for the hum of the lights and the distant sound of the river. My son. My only child. The boy I raised alone. The boy I gave everything to. He was planning to destroy me. Not out of desperation. Not out of confusion. Out of greed. Cold, calculated, deliberate greed. Frank. Ruth's voice seemed far away. What do you want to do? I did not answer. Could not. Ruth stood. Take your time. I will be downstairs if you need me. She closed the door, quietly behind her. I sat there for 2 hours. Alone. Reading those emails over and over. Dad will not suspect a thing. He trusts me. He is just a boat mechanic who got lucky. Handling him is easy. Part of me wanted to drive to Ethan's condo in the Pearl District. Throw those emails in his face. Demand to know when he had become this person. But I did not. Because when someone shows you who they really are, you do not argue. You act. Ethan thought I was naive. Thought I was trusting. Thought I was just an old man who got lucky with a garbage business on the river. He was wrong. I had built Brennan Maritime from nothing, survived losing my wife, raised a son alone, employed 240 people. You do not do that by being stupid. You do it by being patient, by thinking ahead, by knowing when the tide is about to turn. I stood up, gathered the documents, locked them in my desk drawer. Then, I picked up the phone. Henry, I said when he answered. I need you at the yard. Tonight. It is urgent. Frank, it is almost 10. I know. But this cannot wait. I looked at Ethan's email on my screen. Bring everything you need for estate planning, trusts, inheritance clauses, protection clauses. I took a breath. And bring papers for legal adoption. There was a long pause. Adoption? Frank, what is going on? Insurance, I said. I am planning insurance. I hung up and looked out the window. The yard was dark. The river moved like black glass. My father built nothing but a name. He fished those waters for 41 years and left me a boat and his word. But he gave me something no amount of money could buy. He gave me the knowledge that a man's name is the only thing nobody can repossess. My son was trying to take that from me. He was wrong. Because I had been fighting my whole life. And I was not about to stop now. Henry Tran arrived at 11:15. His headlights swept across the empty parking lot as he pulled up next to my truck. He got out carrying his briefcase, moving fast for a man of 67. Silver hair, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. The look of someone who had been pulled out of a quiet evening and knew it was for a reason. Henry had been my lawyer for 25 years. More than that, he was my friend. He had helped me incorporate Brennan Maritime back in 2001, handled every contract, every dispute, every legal challenge since. If there was one person on this earth I trusted as much as I trusted myself, it was Henry Tran. He came through the office door and stopped when he saw my face. "All right, Frank. Talk to me." I did not waste time. Slid the folder across the desk. Ruth's folder. The one that had gutted me 3 hours ago. Henry sat down and started reading. Federal investigation documents. Financial records. The emails. Especially the emails. Ethan's words, in black and white, plotting to destroy me. 20 minutes of silence. Just the sound of pages turning. And Henry's occasional sharp intake of breath. The overhead light buzzed. The river moved outside in the dark. Finally, he looked up. His expression had changed. The casual concern was gone. What replaced it was something harder. Professional. That eye. The face of a man who had spent 40 years in law and knew exactly how bad this was. "Frank, this is prosecutable. Federal crimes. Multiple counts. The FBI will want this evidence." "I know. So why am I looking at it instead of federal agents?" "Because I want something else first." Henry pulled out his legal pad. The same yellow pad he had used for 25 years. "What are you thinking?" "My will. I want to change it. And I want to make sure Ethan cannot touch Brennan Maritime. Not now. Not ever. Go on. He is changing his name at the wedding. Ethan Kensington Brennan. Putting their name first." I paused. "If he does that, I want him to lose everything." Henry wrote notes. Fast, precise. A conditional inheritance clause. "You have every legal right to set terms for your estate. Can we make it automatic?" "No appeals. No way around it. We can make it ironclad." He looked up. "Walk me through exactly what you want." We spent the next hour drafting. Henry knew estate law cold. Every word had to be precise. Every clause had to hold up under challenge. The core was simple, but devastating. Any direct descendant who legally changes, replaces, or subordinates the Brennan surname shall automatically and irrevocably forfeit all inheritance rights to the estate, business holdings, and financial assets of Frank Arthur Brennan. That is bulletproof, Henry said. No court in this country will overturn a clearly stated testamentary condition tied to a voluntary act. He changes the name. He triggers the clause. Done. Good. Now, what happens to Brennan Maritime when Ethan is out? Who do you want? Jonas Park. My chief marine engineer. Henry raised an eyebrow. You are sure? His father died on a ferry because someone cut corners on safety. Jonas came to this country with nothing. I pulled him out of the river 5 years ago. He has worked every day since like he is trying to repay a debt I never asked for. I looked at Henry. He understands what this company means. He understands what the Brennan name stands for. My son never did. You trust him more than your own blood. Would not be hard at this point. Henry made more notes. Here is what I recommend. 55% of company shares to Jonas. 45% to a charitable foundation, keeps the company stable, and accomplishes something meaningful. The Maggie Brennan Foundation, I said. The name came out before I had time to think about it, but it was right. It was the only name that fit. For families who have lost someone, medical bills, funeral costs, education, the things that fall through the cracks when life takes everything from you. Henry's pen stopped moving. He looked at me over his glasses. Maggie would have liked that. Yeah. My voice was rough. She would have. Now. Henry set his pen down. If we are giving Jonas 55% of a company valued at over $30 million, we need to make it bulletproof. Ethan will contest. He will claim you were not in your right mind, that Jonas manipulated you, that you were coerced. How do we prevent that? Adopt him. Legally. Adult adoption gives Jonas the same legal standing as a biological child. Equal rights, equal protections. No contest possible. Something settled in my chest. A weight I did not know I was carrying shifted and found a place to rest. Jonas Park Brennan, I said. Exactly. Henry pulled out different forms. I will draw up the adoption papers tonight. It takes about 2 weeks to process through the courts. Once it is done, he is legally your son. Equal standing with Ethan. And if Ethan backs out? Does not change his name? Then the clause never triggers. He keeps his inheritance. Business as usual. Henry looked at me. Serious now. The friend. Not the lawyer. But Frank. Once he changes that name, there is no going back. This is irrevocable. You will be cutting off your only child. He cut me off first, I said. When he called my name rust and engine oil. When he wrote that I was just a boat mechanic who got lucky. I am not cutting him off, Henry. I am making official what he already decided. Henry studied me for a long moment. 25 years of friendship in that look. Then he nodded. All right. Let us make this airtight. He drafted the language with the precision of a surgeon, called in 2 associates from his firm, who did not know me or my family. Perfect witnesses. A notary arrived at 12:30. We signed everything, dated it, sealed it. The will stays sealed until triggered. Henry explained. Attorney-client privilege. Ethan will not know until he changes his name. By then, it is too late. Good. Henry walked me to the door. It was past 1 in the morning. The parking lot was empty. The river was invisible in the dark, but I could hear it. Moving. Always moving. When are you telling Jonas? Henry asked. Soon. Before the wedding. He needs to know. And Ethan? He will find out at the wedding. I looked at Henry. In front of everyone. The same place. Henry shook his head slightly. Remind me never to cross you, Frank. You have been loyal for 25 years, Henry. You have nothing to worry about. I drove home through empty Portland streets. Past 1 in the morning now. Rain on the windshield. Headlights on wet pavement. The documents were signed. The trap was set. All Ethan had to do was walk into it, and I knew he would. Because my son had never faced a real consequence in his entire life. I had protected him from everything, made sure he never had to lose, never had to struggle, never had to learn that choices have prices. That was ending now. Ethan thought he was smarter than me. Thought I was naive, trusting, easy to handle. He was about to learn he was wrong, because he was playing against someone who had survived 73 years of storms, who had lost his wife and kept going, who had built an empire from grief and a fishing boat and sheer refusal to quit. My son thought he knew me. He had no idea. And Maggie, if she could see me now, I think she would understand. She would be heartbroken about Ethan, but she would have loved Jonas. I was sure of that. The documents were signed. The trap was set. All Ethan had to do was walk into it. And I knew he would. because my son had never faced a consequence in his life. That was about to change. 2 weeks later, I asked Jonas to stay after everyone left. What happened in that office was the hardest and most beautiful conversation of my life. It was a Friday afternoon in mid-November. The yard was winding down for the weekend. Cranes shutting off, welders pulling masks, the last trucks rolling through the gate. Through my office window I could see the Willamette catching the last of the autumn light, that copper color again. The color it turns when the sun drops behind the west hills and the whole river looks like it is on fire. I found Jonas in the maintenance bay, reviewing next week's dry dock rotation on his tablet. Precise as always. Everything scheduled. Everything accounted for. "Jonas," I said from the doorway, "can you stay a few minutes after everyone clears out? I need to talk to you about something." He looked up. I saw the flash of worry. "Is everything okay? Did I miss something on the Collins refit?" "You are not in trouble," I said. "Just stay." Of course. An hour later the building was empty. Just the two of us and the sound of the river through the walls. I asked Jonas to come to my office. He walked in looking nervous, hands at his sides, back straight, like a soldier reporting for duty. 9 years of working for me, 5 of them full-time. And he still thought every private conversation was a test he might fail. "Sit down, Jonas." He sat, perched on the edge of the chair. I had thought about how to say this for 2 weeks. Practiced it in the truck, in the shower, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. But now, sitting across from him with the sunset turning the office gold, all those rehearsed words disappeared. So I just said it. "I want to legally adopt you. Make you my son." Jonas Park Brennan. Jonas did not move, did not blink, just stared at me like I had spoken in a language he had not heard since he was 14 years old. "I have already drawn up the papers with my lawyer," I continued. "They have been processed through the courts. Everything is legal. All that is left is your signature." I paused. "If you want to." Silence. 10 seconds. 20. The river moved outside. A truck rumbled past on the road below. Then Jonas's eyes filled. "Frank." It was the first time he had used my first name in 5 years. His voice cracked on it. "I do not deserve this." "Do not deserve it?" I leaned forward. "Jonas, you have earned this every single day. 5 years. No shortcuts. No complaints. You showed up when nobody asked you to and stayed when it would have been easier to leave. But Ethan," his voice broke further, "he is your son. Your real son." Ethan made his choice. He does not want the Brennan name. I held Jonas's gaze. "You do." Jonas wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Tried to compose himself. Could not. "There is more," I said. "If you accept this, if you become my son legally, you will inherit 55% of Brennan Maritime." His breath stopped. "That is worth about $19 million, give or take. And you will run this company when I step back. Not because you are my heir, because you are the best person for the job. You always have been." Jonas put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. I gave him time. Watched the sunset move across the wall. This young man, who had lost everything on the water, who had been pulled from a river by a stranger and turned that second chance into something real, who never forgot, never took anything for granted, never once looked at me and saw anything less than what I was. "My father," Jonas said finally. His voice was raw, quiet. He was a good man. He worked on ships his whole life. Cargo vessels, out of Busan. He took that ferry because my sister wanted to see the ocean from the other side of the island. Jonas stopped, swallowed. He was holding her hand when the ship went down. They found them together. I did not speak. Some moments are not meant to be filled. "I lost my family on the water," Jonas said. He looked at me. His eyes were red, but steady. "And you gave me a new one on the water." Something broke open in my chest. The good kind of breaking. The kind that lets light in where there was only dark. The remaining 45% goes to the Maggie Brennan Foundation, I said. A charity named for my late wife. For families who have lost someone. Medical bills. Education. The things that fall through the cracks. Jonas nodded. Tears still running, but his jaw was set. He understood. He understood all of it. There is one condition, I said quietly. You cannot tell Ethan. Not until after the wedding. Why? Because I need him to make his choice freely. Without knowing what he is giving up. He needs to choose the Kensingtons on his own. Jonas studied my face. He was smart. He knew there was more to this than I was saying. But he did not push. Okay, he said. I will not tell him. You understand what you are agreeing to? You will be my son. Legally. Permanently. You will carry the Brennan name. I understand. His voice was stronger now. Clearer. And I want it. I want to be a Brennan. Something loosened inside me. Something that had been wound tight since that engagement party 6 months ago. Then we should probably make it official. I pulled out the adoption papers Henry had prepared. Set them on the desk between us. Jonas read through them slowly. His hands trembled as he turned each page. When he reached the signature line, he looked up. Are you sure? He asked. I have never been more sure of anything. He signed. Neat handwriting. Careful. Jonas Park. Soon to be Jonas Park Brennan. I signed below him. Dated it. It was done. Jonas stood. Came around the desk. And before I could react, he hugged me. Not a polite hug. Not a professional handshake. Disguised as an embrace. A real hug. The kind a son gives his father when he has not been able to for 15 years. Tight. Desperate. Grateful. I hugged him back. Held on. This young man who understood what Ethan never had. That the Brennan name was not something you ran from. It was something you earned. When he pulled back, his face was wet, but he was almost smiling. If we are doing this, I said, you should probably stop calling me boss. Jonas laughed. Short. Broken. Beautiful. What should I call you? I thought about Ethan. About all the times he had called me dad before he started being too embarrassed to introduce me to his friends. Before he started wishing I was someone else. Before he started planning to destroy me. If we are doing this, I said quietly, you should call me Dad. Jonas's face crumpled. Not from sadness. From something he had not felt since he was 14 years old, standing on a dock in South Korea, watching the Coast Guard bring back bodies instead of survivors. Dad, he whispered. Yeah. My voice was rough. Rougher than I wanted it to be. That is right. He hugged me again. This time I held on longer. Because I had lost a son to greed and gained a son through loyalty. And standing in that office with the sunset dying on the river and the shipyard quiet below us, I knew something Ethan would never understand. Family is not blood. It is who shows up. It is who stays. It is who holds on when letting go would be easier. Jonas understood that. Ethan never had. And in 6 weeks, at a wedding on a yacht I was paying for, everyone would know which one of them was truly my son. I am not a cruel man. I have never wanted to be. So before the wedding, before I set everything in motion, I gave my son one last chance, one final meal, to prove me wrong, to show me he was still in there somewhere, the boy who used to hold my hand on the dock in Astoria. He failed. And he did not even know he was being tested. 1 month before the wedding. December. Portland in December is dark, by 4:30. The rain turns cold, almost sleet, but not quite. The kind of weather that makes you want to stay inside with someone you trust. I did not have that luxury. I chose Moe's Seafood. Our place. The booth where Ethan used to sit with me as a kid, drawing boats on paper napkins while I drank coffee and planned the week. The same booth where I had eaten breakfast for 18 years. I thought maybe the place would remind him. Maybe the smell of fried fish and coffee and the river through the window would pull something loose inside him. Some memory he had buried. I arrived at noon. Ordered coffee. Waited. Ethan showed up 25 minutes late. No apology. No explanation. Just walked in like the world owed him the extra time. He was wearing a suit that probably cost $3,000. Charcoal gray. Perfectly tailored. The kind of suit that says, "I do not belong in a place like this." He looked at Mo's the way you look at a gas station bathroom. Quick assessment, mild distaste, decision to tolerate it. Mo came over with menus. Same Mo who had served Ethan grilled cheese sandwiches when he was 12. Same Mo who used to slip extra fries onto the kid's plate because he knew I was working too hard to cook proper dinners. "What can I get you to drink, son?" Mo asked. Ethan barely looked at him. "Just water." Mo's expression did not change. But I saw it. That small tightening around his eyes. The look of a man who remembers the boy and does not recognize the man. "How are the wedding plans?" I asked. "Good." "Expensive." Ethan checked his phone. "Sloan wants everything perfect. I am happy to help with costs. You are helping." "Thanks." Flat. Like thanking a vending machine for dropping a soda. We ordered. Ethan got a salad. At Mo's Seafood. A salad. Mo did not say anything, but I caught the look he gave me over the counter. We both knew. Ethan checked his phone 3 more times before the food arrived. Then he set it down and leaned back. "Actually, Dad, there is something I wanted to talk about." "What is that?" "Your retirement." I took a sip of coffee. "I am not retiring. I know. But maybe you should think about it." His voice took on that reasoning tone. The one you use with a stubborn child who does not understand what is good for him. "You are 73. You have worked your whole life. Do you not want to relax? Travel? Let someone else handle the stress? I enjoy my work." "But Dad." He leaned forward. "You cannot do this forever. Your body cannot take it. The industry is changing. Digital systems, automated logistics. Sloan's father could really help us modernize. He has connections in shipping that could take Brennan Maritime to a whole new level." There it was. Sloan's father. The criminal. The man. Facing federal charges. Sitting in my diner, eating a salad he did not want. My son was pitching me the same con his future father-in-law had designed. "What kind of connections?" I asked. Keeping my voice even. "People who understand the maritime industry at scale. Government contracts. Port authority relationships. Real infrastructure, Dad. Not just 12 dry docks on the Willamette. Not just 12 dry docks." Like 27 years of work was a starting point for someone else's ambition. His phone rang. Sloan's name on the screen. "Sorry, I have to take this." He walked outside. I watched through the window. Ethan pacing on the sidewalk in his $3,000 suit. Gesturing. Animated. More alive talking to Sloan for 2 minutes than he had been sitting with me for 20. Mo refilled my coffee. Did not say a word. Did not need to. Ethan came back. "Sorry. Wedding stuff." He sat down and picked up where he left off, like the interruption had not happened. "We could really modernize the operation. New systems. Rebranding. Sloan's father knows people who could make us competitive with the national firms." "Rebranding," I said. "Yeah. Something more contemporary. More corporate." He paused. Just a second. But I caught it. The name could use an update. I4. Mine noun. I4. 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 The name. Just thinking out loud. He was not thinking out loud. He was testing the water. Seeing how far he could push before I pushed back. But I did not push. Not today. Today I was just watching. Confirming. The check came. Ethan did not reach for it. I paid. Same as always. Outside, Ethan gave me a quick hug, the kind that barely counts. Arms touching but not holding. The kind of hug you give someone you are obligated to touch. Think about it, Dad, he said. You have earned a rest. I will think about it, he smiled. Knew you would understand. Love you, Dad. He walked to his car, a leased BMW that Sloane's father co-signed, and drove away. I stood in the parking lot in the rain, watching his taillights disappear down the street. Mo came outside, wiping his hands on his apron, rain catching on his glasses. You okay, Frank? Yeah, that boy of yours. Mo shook his head slowly. He do not see you, does he? No, I said. He does not. Mo went back inside. I stood there a while longer, rain on my face, hands in my pockets, thinking. Ethan was not being manipulated. He was not some innocent kid blinded by love. He knew exactly what Sloane's family was. Knew they were criminals. And he was pitching me their con job over a salad he did not eat in a diner he was embarrassed to walk into. That lunch killed the last bit of hope in my chest. The last small flame that maybe, somehow, my son was still in there. That maybe he was just confused. Just weak. Just making a bad decision he would eventually see through. No. He saw clearly. He saw everything. And he chose them. 4 weeks. In 4 weeks. On a yacht he did not pay for. Surrounded by people who did not know his real name, my son would learn what happens when you try to sink a Brennan. We do not drown. We come back with the tide. The wedding was on a Saturday in early January. Portland winter. Cold rain that never quite turns to snow. Just hangs in the air like it is watching you. Waiting. I woke up at 4 that morning. Same time I always wake up. Sat on the edge of my bed in the dark house in St. John's and stared at the suit hanging on the closet door. New suit. I had bought it specifically for today. Dark navy, simple cut, nothing fancy. Still felt like a costume on a man who had spent his life in work jackets. On the nightstand, a photograph. Maggie and me on our wedding day in 1979. Beach in Astoria. 15 people. Borrowed dress. Rented suit. Rain the whole time. She was laughing in the picture. That was Maggie. She laughed when things went wrong because she said it was the only honest response to a world that never goes according to plan. I picked up the photograph, looked at her face. I wish you could tell me if I am doing the right thing, I said to the empty room. She did not answer. She never did. But I knew what she would say. Protect the name. Protect what we built. And if our son will not carry it, find someone who will. I put the photograph down. Got dressed. Drove to the marina. The yacht was docked at a private slip on the Columbia River, east of the city. I arrived at 4 in the afternoon. The rain had softened to a mist. The boat sat on the dark water, like a floating palace. 120 feet of polished teak and glass. White flowers lining the gangway. Candles in glass holders along the rails. A crew of 30, moving between decks. Adjusting lights. Arranging chairs. Testing sound systems. I had paid for all of it. Every flower, every candle, every plate, every glass of champagne that would be poured tonight. $87,000. I had written the check without blinking because that is what fathers do, even when their sons do not deserve it. Celeste, the wedding planner, found me at the bottom of the gangway. Clipboard, earpiece. The expression of someone managing a military operation. Mr. Brennan. Welcome. You are at table 16, not the head table? Her smile was professional. Practiced. That is reserved for the bride's immediate family and the wedding party. Table 16 has a lovely view of the river. Table 16 was behind a decorative pillar on the lower deck. The seats faced the wrong direction. You could see the river if you craned your neck. You could not see the head table at all. That was the point. I sat down, folded my hands, waited. Jonas arrived at 4:30. He was wearing a simple dark suit. No labels, no flash. He found table 16 without being told. Sat down next to me. He did not comment on the table, did not comment on the pillar. Just sat and looked at me with steady eyes. "How are you feeling?" he asked quietly. "Ready. The boat is in position?" I nodded. 3 days ago, I had arranged for my father's fishing boat, the Queen Maeve, to be transported to the marina and loaded onto the upper deck of the yacht, covered with a large tarp. Celeste had been told it was a decorative installation, a surprise for the reception. She did not ask questions. I had paid her enough not to. "AV Tech?" Jonas asked. "Handled. I spoke with him this morning. Laptop connected to the main screen. Everything is loaded and ready. Security? 2 men. Hired privately. They will be near the head table starting at 7. Jonas nodded. Then he put his hand on my arm. Brief. Firm. "Whatever happens tonight, Dad, I am right here." I know. The ceremony started at 5:30. The string quartet played something soft and classical as the guests took their seats. 180 chairs arranged in rows on the main deck, facing a floral arch at the bow of the yacht. The Columbia River stretched behind it, gray and wide and ancient. Ethan stood at the arch in his tuxedo. $6,000 of Italian fabric. He looked like a magazine advertisement. Confident. Polished. A man who belonged in rooms I had never been invited to. Sloane appeared at the top of the gangway stairs. $18,000 of white silk. Every head turned. She moved like someone who had been practicing this walk her entire life. Dominic walked beside her, one hand on her arm. Chin high, the expression of a man delivering a prize. They reached the arch. The officiant spoke. Sloane and Ethan exchanged vows they had written themselves. Words like forever, and destiny and legacy. Words that sounded beautiful and meant nothing. They exchanged rings. They kissed. 180 people stood and applauded. I stayed seated. The reception began at 6:30. French cuisine. 3 courses. Wine pairings. The head table was on a raised platform at the front of the upper deck. Ethan and Sloane in the center. Dominic to Sloane's right. His wife to Ethan's left. Bridesmaids and groomsmen filling out the rest. No chair for the father of the groom. Not at that table. I barely touched my food. Just watched. The way Dominic held court at the head table. The way Sloane touched Ethan's arm every few minutes. The way my son smiled at people whose names he had not known 6 months ago. At 7:30, the speeches began. Dominic went first. He stood with a champagne glass raised, voice carrying across the deck like a man accustomed to being heard. "Tonight, we welcome Ethan into the Kensington legacy, a family built on ambition, on excellence, on the courage to reach for something greater. We are honored that he has chosen to carry our name forward." Applause. Warm. Generous. The applause of people who believed what they were hearing. Sloane spoke next. Brief. Polished. "I want to thank my incredible family. The Kensington name has shaped everything I am, and I am so blessed that Ethan wants to be a part of that." Then Ethan took the microphone. He was smiling. That wide, bright smile I used to see when he was a boy opening Christmas presents. Except this time the present was a name, and he was unwrapping it in front of everyone. "I have an announcement," he said. The room went quiet, leaned forward. "As of this morning, I have officially and legally changed my name." He paused. Let it land. "I am now Ethan Kensington Brennan. Kensington first. Because the Kensington name represents everything I aspire to be. Everything I want to build." The AV screen behind him lit up. A legal name change certificate. Stamps. Signatures. Ethan Kensington Brennan. In bold type. The room erupted. Standing ovation. Champagne raised. Someone near the front shouted, "That is beautiful." Sloane kissed him. Dominic stood and shook his hand. Cameras everywhere. Flashes popping. People pulling out phones to record. I sat at table 16. Behind the pillar. My hands were still. My face was still. Inside, something moved. Not anger. Not sadness. Something older. Something that had been waiting for this exact moment for 6 months. I looked at the empty space beside Dominic's wife. The space where the mother of the groom should have been sitting. Maggie's space. Empty. Jonas looked at me. His eyes were calm. Steady. The eyes of a man who had already lost everything once and was not afraid of what came next. "Dad," he said. I checked my watch. 7:42. "It is time." I stood up. The applause was still going. People on their feet. Glasses raised. Phones out. Ethan was beaming at the head table. Arm around Sloane, basking in the warmth of 180 strangers who thought he was brave. And I started walking toward the front of that yacht. At exactly 7:43 p.m., I stood up from table 16. 180 guests turned their heads. Some of them smiled, expecting the father of the groom to say something warm, something safe. A toast about love and family and the future. That is what fathers do at weddings. That is what they expected from the old man sitting behind a pillar in a rented suit that smelled faintly of diesel. I walked to the front of the yacht deck. The Columbia River moved black and quiet beneath us. Portland's city lights reflected off the water like scattered coins. My son Ethan stood near the head table with his new wife, Sloane Kensington Brennan, and her father, Dominic Kensington. Ethan's legal name change certificate was still glowing on the projection screen behind them. Ethan Kensington Brennan. The Brennan part shoved to the back like an afterthought, like a stain they could not quite wash out. The crowd had given him a standing ovation for that. I took the microphone from the DJ stand. My hands did not shake. I had spent 47 years gripping engine parts, hull plates, and frozen dock lines in January storms. A microphone was nothing. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I said. "My name is Frank Brennan. Some of you know me. Most of you do not. That is fine. But before this night ends, every person on this boat will know exactly what the Brennan name means." I nodded once to Jonas, who stood near the AV station on the upper deck. He pressed a button. The main screen behind the head table flickered, and the name change certificate disappeared. In its place appeared a photograph of a 36-foot fishing trawler with a dark green hull and white trim. The paint was chipped. The deck was worn smooth from decades of nets and salt and boots. Across the stern, in hand-painted letters, it read, "Queen Maeve. This boat belonged to my father, Arthur Brennan," I said. "He fished the Oregon coast for 41 years. He bought this trawler with cash. He saved working 3 jobs for 6 years. He named it after my mother's favorite story. He died on the water, and my mother died waiting for him on shore." The room was silent. When my wife Maggie passed in 2006, I sold this boat for $63,000. I used that money to rent a dry dock on the Willamette River. I slept on a cot for 3 years. I ate canned soup and crackers. And I built Brennan Maritime Services from that $63,000 into a company worth $36 million, employing 240 people across 12 dry docks. I paused. Let the number sit. 3 days ago, I bought the Queen Maeve back. Paid twice what I sold her for. She is sitting on the upper deck of this yacht right now, covered by a tarp. Jonas, if you would. Jonas pulled a rope. The gray canvas tarp slid off the old trawler like a curtain falling from a stage. There she was. Battered. Beautiful. Still smelling of salt and diesel and memory. Several guests gasped. A woman near table 4 put her hand over her mouth. "That boat is where the Brennan name started," I said. "Not in a boardroom. Not in a Pearl District penthouse. On the Pacific Ocean, in a storm. With a man who never once complained about who he was." I turned to face my son. Ethan's face had gone white. Sloane gripped his arm. Dominic Kensington was already scanning the exits. "Now," I said, "let me tell you what the Kensington name means." Jonas switched the screen. The first slide showed a federal investigation summary stamped "Confidential." 10 months of surveillance. Kensington Shipping LLC, under active investigation by the United States Coast Guard, the FBI, and the EPA for smuggling hazardous materials through Pacific Northwest ports, customs fraud, and money laundering totaling an estimated $14 million. The second slide showed emails. Emails between Sloan, Dominic, and my son. Emails that outlined a plan to merge Kensington Shipping into Brennan Maritime, transfer all criminal liability onto my company, and walk away clean while I rotted in a federal prison. The third slide showed Sloan's personal financial records. $87,000 in debt. 3 previous relationships with wealthy older men, each ending in financial collapse for the man involved. A pattern so clean it could have been drawn with a ruler. The fourth slide was the one that broke the room. It was an email from my son, sent to Sloan 11 weeks earlier. It read, "After the merger, the projected sale value is $350 million. We split 3 ways. Dad gets nothing. He is too old to fight it. By the time he figures it out, we will be in Monaco." I let the crowd read it twice. 6 weeks ago, I said, "I changed my will. The new terms are simple. Any direct descendant who legally changes, removes, or replaces the Brennan surname forfeits all inheritance, all business holdings, and all assets connected to my estate. This clause is irrevocable." Ethan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "My son changed his name tonight," I said. "Which means, as of approximately 1 hour ago, he has forfeited everything." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a single folded document. "This is an adoption certificate. I have legally adopted Jonas Park as my son. His name is now Jonas Park Brennan. He will inherit 55% of Brennan Maritime Services and serve as its next CEO. The remaining 45% goes to the Maggie Brennan Foundation, a charity I created in my wife's name to support families who have lost loved ones." Jonas stood on the upper deck beside the Queen Maeve, his jaw tight, his eyes red but steady. The yacht erupted. Chairs scraped. Voices overlapped. Dominic lunged for the stairs, but my 2 private security guards blocked the exit calmly. Sloan screamed something I did not bother to hear. Ethan stood frozen at the head table, staring at the email on the screen with his own words glowing back at him. I set the microphone down on the DJ table. I straightened my rented jacket. I walked to the upper deck, put my hand on Jonas's shoulder, and we stood there together beside my father's old boat. "Let's go to Moe's," I said. "I need coffee." We walked off that yacht, climbed into my 22-year-old dented truck, and drove through the rain to a diner on Lombard Street while the Kensington Empire collapsed on a decorated boat behind us. By morning, every phone in Portland would have the video. The Brennan name was not embarrassing anymore. The video hit the internet at 11:47 p.m. that same night. I did not post it. I did not ask anyone to post it. But 180 guests had phones, and at least 40 of them had been recording when I pulled that tarp off the Queen Maeve. By midnight, 3 separate clips were circulating on Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. By 2 a.m., a Portland news station picked up the story. By sunrise, it had a name. They called it the Brennan Speech. I was sitting at my kitchen table in St. John's when Jonas called me at 6:15 inches the morning. He sounded like he had not slept. "Dad," he said. "The main video has 1.2 million views." I poured my coffee. "Which one?" "The one where you pull the tarp. Someone edited it with subtitles. It is everywhere. Reddit, YouTube, Instagram. The comments are insane. People are calling you the greatest father in America. There is a hashtag, Brennan Strong. I did not know what a hashtag was. Exactly. I knew it was not a type of dock cleat. "What about the other side?" I asked. Jonas paused. Dominic Kensington's company website crashed at 4 a.m. Someone posted the federal investigation screenshots from the video. His stock partners are pulling out. 3 shipping contracts canceled overnight. His lawyers released a statement at 5:30, calling the video defamatory and threatening legal action against anyone who shares it. That will work about as well as plugging a hull breach with newspaper, I said. By 9 a.m., the video had crossed 3.4 million views. My phone, which normally received calls from dock supervisors and parts suppliers, had not stopped buzzing since dawn. Reporters, news producers, podcast hosts. A woman from a cable network whose name I did not recognize asked if I would fly to New York for an interview. I told her I had a boat to fix on Tuesday and hung up. Ruth Calloway arrived at the yard by 7:30, earlier than usual. She walked into my office carrying 2 folders and a look that sat somewhere between admiration and deep concern. "You are the #1 trending topic in the United States right now," she said. "Good morning to you too, Ruth." She set the first folder on my desk. Media requests. 47 since midnight. I sorted them by network size. NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox. 4 podcasts, with over 1 million subscribers. And the Oregonian wants a full feature. No, I figured. Second folder. She opened it. Kensington fallout. Dominic's legal team filed a defamation suit against you at 6 a.m. They are claiming the documents you displayed were obtained illegally and that the presentation caused intentional infliction of emotional distress. I almost laughed. Emotional distress. The man who is planning to put me in federal prison is claiming emotional distress. Ruth sat down across from me. Her reading glasses were slightly crooked, the way they always got when she had been working too fast. "Frank, this is serious. If they push hard enough, a judge could issue an injunction. They could freeze assets. Let them try," I said. Every document I showed came from legal channels. Henry vetted them. The federal investigation is public record once the indictment drops, and based on what we know, that indictment is coming within weeks. Dominic is not suing me because he thinks he can win. He is suing me because he needs to look like he is fighting back. Ruth nodded slowly. "There is one more thing." She pulled a printed email from the second folder and slid it across the desk. It was from Ethan, sent at 3:22 a.m. to my company email address, which he had not used in over 2 years. It read, "Dad, I need to talk to you. Please. I know you probably will not answer, but I need you to know that I did not understand what they were planning. Not all of it. I know that sounds like an excuse. It probably is one. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for 5 minutes. Please." I read it 3 times. The first time, I felt nothing. The second time, I felt the kind of anger that lives in your chest, like a hot coal you cannot cough up. The third time, I felt something worse than anger. I felt sorry for him. "What do you want to do?" Ruth asked. "Nothing," I said. "Not yet." Outside, the yard was running like it always did. Hector had the morning crew on Dock 6, replacing a keel plate on a 40-foot charter vessel. I could hear the grinders through my window, a sound that had been the background music of my life for 27 years. Jonas was on Dock 4 inspecting the Collins trawler, clipboard in hand, hard hat on straight, moving between welders with the kind of quiet authority that cannot be taught. At 11 a.m., Henry Tran called. "Frank, 2 things. First, Dominic's defamation suit is dead on arrival. The documents are sourced from public filings and whistleblower-protected channels. I will have it dismissed within 30 days. Second, the U.S., Coast Guard and FBI have accelerated their timeline. A federal grand jury has been convened. Indictments for Dominic Kensington, Sloan Kensington, and 3 associates are expected within 2 weeks. Charges include smuggling of hazardous materials, customs fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. And Ethan?" Henry was quiet for a moment. Ethan is listed as a cooperating witness, not a target. For now, that could change, depending on what the grand jury finds. I hung up the phone and sat in my chair. The Willamette River moved past my window, gray and steady, the way it had moved every day since I first rented that tiny dock in 2006 with $63,000 and a broken heart. My phone buzzed again. Another reporter. I turned it face down. At 2 p.m., Jonas came into my office. He had grease on his forearms and sawdust in his hair. He looked like a man who belonged in a shipyard. The video just passed 6 million views, he said. Someone made a remix with dramatic music. It has its own Wikipedia page now. Does it mention the Queen Maeve? First paragraph. I nodded. Good. That is the only part that matters. Jonas sat down in the chair across from me. The same chair Ruth had used that morning. The same chair where I had told him about the adoption 3 months earlier. He looked at me with steady eyes. What happens next, Dad? I looked out the window at the river. At the cranes. At the men and women in hard hats who had built their lives around this yard and this name. The tide comes in, I said. And we get back to work. The federal agents arrived on a Tuesday morning, 11 days after the wedding. I was on Dock 7, inspecting a corroded propeller shaft on a 60-foot commercial crabber, when Jonas jogged across the yard toward me. His face told me everything before his mouth did. Dad. There are 4 vehicles at the front gate. 2 black SUVs, a Coast Guard van, and a sedan with federal plates. They are asking for you. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and handed the inspection clipboard to Hector. Finish the shaft assessment. If the corrosion goes deeper than a 1/4 inch, pull the whole unit. Hector nodded. He did not ask questions. He had been with me 11 years. He knew when to talk and when to work. I walked across the yard with Jonas beside me. The morning air smelled like rain and welding smoke. The cranes on docks 4 and 9 were running. 240 people were at their stations, doing what they did every day. Building things, fixing things, keeping boats alive. At the front gate stood 6 people in dark jackets. 2 wore Coast Guard insignias. 2 carried FBI badges. 1 woman in a charcoal suit stepped forward. She was about 45, with short brown hair and the kind of eyes that had spent a career reading people who did not want to be read. Mr. Brennan? I am Special Agent Catherine Holt, FBI, Portland Field Office. This is Lieutenant Commander James Oda, United States Coast Guard Investigative Service. We have a federal search warrant for these premises, specifically dry docks 4, 7, and 11, your administrative offices, and all digital records related to cargo manifests, access logs, and communications with Kensington Shipping, LLC. She handed me the warrant. 8 pages. Signed by a federal magistrate judge. I read every word, while 6 federal agents stood in my yard and my workers stopped their grinders and welders to watch. Jonas, I said without looking up. Call Henry Tran. Tell him to be here in 30 minutes. Already called him on the way over, Jonas said. He is 15 minutes out. I looked at Agent Holt. This warrant covers my property. My employees have nothing to do with Kensington Shipping. I want your team to conduct their search without disrupting active repair operations on docks that are not listed here. People depend on these jobs. Agent Holt studied me for a moment. Understood, Mr. Brennan. We will limit our activity to the specified areas. They moved fast. Within 20 minutes, a forensic team was inside docks 4, 7, and 11, photographing floors, scanning cargo markings, and collecting samples from surfaces that Jonas had flagged weeks ago. The same docks where someone had used the master override code between 1 and 3 a.m. on those Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday nights. Another team entered my office and began imaging hard drives, copying email servers, and cataloging paper files. Henry Tran arrived at 8:47 a.m. in his silver Lexus, wearing a suit that cost more than my truck. He was 67 years old and moved like a man who had spent 25 years making sure other people's mistakes did not become permanent. He shook Agent Holt's hand, reviewed the warrant, and positioned himself beside me like a wall. "Frank, do not answer any questions without me present," he said quietly. "Cooperate with the search. Do not volunteer information. Let them find what we already know they will find." At 9:30 a.m., Agent Holt asked me to sit down in my own office, which now had 2 FBI technicians pulling cables from my desktop computer. Lieutenant Commander Ota stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the yard. "Mr. Brennan," Agent Holt said, "we have been investigating Kensington shipping for 11 months. Smuggling of hazardous industrial waste through Pacific Northwest ports, falsified customs declarations, and a money laundering network that moved approximately $14 million through shell companies in 3 states. Your facility was used as a transit point. Specifically, docks 4, 7, and 11 were accessed at night to temporarily store and transfer undeclared cargo containers before they were moved to Kensington-controlled vessels. I am aware of the unauthorized access," I said. "My chief engineer discovered the pattern 6 weeks ago. I reported it to my attorney." Henry placed a folder on the desk. "Agent Holt, my client identified the breach independently and preserved all internal evidence, including access logs, security footage gaps, and cargo residue documentation. He did not participate in, authorize, or benefit from any Kensington operation. I have a full evidentiary packet prepared for your review." Agent Holt opened the folder. She read for 4 minutes without speaking. Ota leaned over her shoulder and read with her. "Your son, Ethan Brennan, excuse me, Ethan Kensington Brennan, is the only other individual with the master override code for these docks. Is that correct?" "Yes," I said. "And you believe your son provided access to Kensington operatives?" Henry put his hand on my arm. "My client's beliefs are not relevant. The access logs speak for themselves. Ethan Kensington Brennan had the code. The code was used. My client did not use it. Draw your own conclusions." Agent Holt closed the folder. "Mr. Brennan, you are not a target of this investigation at this time. You are being treated as a cooperating witness. However, I need to inform you that if evidence emerges linking you to any Kensington operation, that status will change immediately." "Understood," I said. The search lasted 6 hours. They took 14 boxes of documents, 3 hard drives, soil and chemical samples from all 3 docks, and a set of cargo manifests that Ruth Calloway had already flagged and copied months ago. Ruth watched them carry the boxes out with her arms folded and her reading glasses on top of her head, looking like a woman who had been proven right about something she wished she had been wrong about. By 3 p.m., the yard was quiet again. The agents were gone. The cranes started back up. Hector had the Dock 6 crew running on schedule. Despite the disruption, Jonas stood in the doorway of my office, which now had empty spaces where file cabinets and computers had been. "They took everything from docks 4, 7, and 11, he said. "Chemical traces, floor scrapings, even the lock mechanisms. Whatever Ethan let them move through here. The feds now have a physical trail." I sat in my chair. The river was still there outside my window. It did not care about search warrants or federal agents or sons who sold their fathers for a 3-way split of $350 million. "Henry says the grand jury indictments drop next week," I said. "Dominic, Sloan, and 3 Kensington associates. And Ethan?" I looked at my hands. Scarred, calloused, 60 years of work written into the skin. "That depends on what he does next." My phone buzzed. A text from a number I did not recognize. I opened it. "Mr. Brennan. This is Sloan. You have made a terrible mistake. My father will bury you. And your little shipyard. Enjoy your 15 minutes. I showed it to Jonas. He read it and shook his head. "She still does not understand," he said. "No," I said. "She does not." I deleted the message, put my phone in my pocket, and walked outside to check on the propeller shaft that still needed fixing on Dock 7. The work does not stop. Because someone threatens you, the work never stops. That is what the Brennan name means. 3 weeks after the raid, someone tried to kill me. It was a Thursday evening, the first week of February. Portland had been sitting under a low gray sky for 9 straight days. The kind of winter that makes the river look like poured concrete. I had worked a full shift at the yard, stayed late to review the quarterly numbers with Ruth, and left at 7:40 p.m. The parking lot was empty, except for my truck and Ruth's Subaru. She walked out behind me, waved goodnight, and drove off toward Selwood. I climbed into my 22-year-old Ford, turned the key. The engine coughed twice before catching, the way it always did when the temperature dropped below 40. I pulled out of the lot, turned left onto Front Avenue, and headed north toward the St. John's Bridge. The first mile was normal. Traffic was thin. The streetlights along the industrial corridor cast long orange shapes on the wet asphalt. I passed the grain terminal, the container yard, the old rail spur that had not moved a train in 6 years. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the rain. At the intersection of Front and Lombard, I pressed the brake pedal to stop at a red light. The pedal went to the floor. No resistance, no friction, no stopping. Just the soft, horrifying sensation of a pedal sinking into nothing, like stepping off the edge of a dock into black water. I pumped the pedal 3 times. Nothing. The truck was rolling at 35 miles an hour toward a red light with cross traffic moving through the intersection. A delivery van was crossing from the left. A sedan was crossing from the right. 47 years of working around heavy machinery, hydraulic systems, and marine engines had trained my hands to react before my brain finished thinking. I yanked the emergency brake handle with my right hand. The rear wheels locked. The truck screamed sideways across the wet road, fishtailing left. I turned the steering wheel into the skid, the way my father taught me on frozen logging roads outside Astoria when I was 16 years old. The truck spun 90 degrees and slammed sideways into a concrete utility pole on the right shoulder. The impact hit the passenger door with a sound like a ship hull striking a pier. The window shattered inward. Glass covered the passenger seat. My head whipped sideways and hit the driver's window. The seatbelt locked across my chest hard enough to leave a bruise the shape of a belt across my collarbone. Then silence. Rain on the roof. The engine still running. The delivery van's horn blaring as it passed through the intersection where I would have been. I sat there for 11 seconds. I counted them because counting is what I do when the world stops making sense. 1, 2, 3, up to 11. Then I turned off the engine, unbuckled my seatbelt, and pushed open the driver's door. My legs were shaking. My head was bleeding from a cut above my left ear. My ribs ached where the seatbelt had held me. I walked to the front of the truck and knelt on the wet road. Brake fluid was pooling under the chassis. A clean, steady stream running from a severed line on the undercarriage. I got down on my back and slid halfway under the truck, using my phone's flashlight to trace the line. The cut was surgical. Not a rupture. Not corrosion. Not wear. A single, deliberate slice through the rubber brake hose on the rear axle, positioned at the exact point where the line ran closest to the frame rail. Whoever did it knew where to cut. They knew the fluid would drain slowly enough pressure for the first few stops, enough to feel normal leaving the parking lot, and then nothing when the system finally bled dry under sustained use. This was not an accident. This was an execution that almost worked. I called Jonas first. He answered on the second ring. "I need you at Front and Lombard," I said. "Bring a flashlight and a camera." "What happened?" "Someone cut my brake line." He was there in 14 minutes. He brought a flashlight, a camera, a first aid kit, and 2 bottles of water. He cleaned the cut on my head with steady hands while I sat on the curb and explained what happened. Then he slid under the truck himself and photographed the severed line from 6 angles. "This is professional," he said, standing up with grease on his jacket. The cut angle, the location, the depth. This was not some angry amateur with a pocket knife. Someone who understands hydraulic systems did this. I know, I said. Kensington? Who else? I called Henry Tran at 8:15 p.m. He called Agent Catherine Holt at 8:22 p.m. By 9 p.m., 2 FBI agents and a Portland police forensic team were at the intersection. They towed my truck to a federal evidence facility. They photographed the brake line, the fluid pool, the skid marks, and the crumpled utility pole. They took my statement. They took Jonas's photographs. Agent Holt arrived at 9:40 p.m. She stood next to me on the sidewalk while the forensic team worked under portable floodlights. Mr. Brennan, we take this seriously. Attempted murder of a cooperating federal witness escalates everything. I am placing you under protective surveillance, starting tonight. An agent will be stationed outside your home around the clock. I do not need a babysitter, I said. With respect, Mr. Brennan, you almost died 45 minutes ago. Someone who understands marine hydraulic systems cut your brake line at your workplace, which means they had access to your parking lot during business hours or shortly after. This is connected to the Kensington case. The grand jury indictments drop in 4 days. Someone is trying to stop that. I looked at the ruined truck. 22 years. 270,000 miles. Every scratch on that body had a story. The dent in the tailgate from a dry dock chain in 2011. The rust spot on the hood from a saltwater splash in 2015. The crack in the dashboard that Maggie used to rest her coffee cup against during Sunday drives along the coast. Now it was sitting on a flatbed, heading to an FBI evidence lot, because someone had decided the easiest way to stop Frank Brennan was to make him crash into an intersection at 35 miles an hour. Jonas drove me home in his Honda Civic. We did not speak for the first 10 minutes. The rain had gotten heavier. The windshield wipers beat a rhythm like a slow heartbeat. They are scared, Jonas finally said. Scared people do desperate things. Scared people also make mistakes, I said. He pulled into my driveway in St. John's. The porch light was on. The house was dark and empty, the way it had been every night since Maggie died. But tonight, for the first time in 20 years, there was an unmarked sedan parked across the street with a federal agent inside. I stepped out of Jonas's car. The rain hit my face. The cut above my ear was still throbbing. My ribs ached with every breath. I turned back to Jonas before going inside. Tell Hector to pull the security footage from the yard parking lot. Every camera. Last 72 hours. And tell Ruth to check the gate access logs for anyone who was not on the employee roster. Jonas nodded. I will have it by morning. I walked to my front door, unlocked it, and stepped inside. The house smelled like old wood and coffee and the faint ghost of Maggie's lavender soap that I still kept in the bathroom even though the scent had nearly faded to nothing. Someone had tried to kill me tonight. They had failed. And in 4 days, a grand jury was going to make sure they never got a second chance. Ethan showed up at the yard on a Monday morning, 6 days after someone cut my brake line. I was in my office reviewing dock schedules with Jonas when Hector radioed from the front gate. His voice was careful, the way a man sounds when he is trying not to say too much over an open channel. Boss, your son is here. He is alone. He is asking to come in. Jonas looked at me. I looked at the river through my window. The Willamette was high and brown from 2 weeks of rain. A tugboat was pushing a barge upstream, slow and steady, the way heavy things move when they know where they are going. Let him in, I said. Ethan walked across the yard like a man entering a country he no longer recognized. He was wearing jeans and a plain gray sweatshirt. No designer suit. No Italian loafers. No $200 sunglasses. His hair was uncombed. His face was thin. He looked like he had lost 15 pounds since the wedding, and none of it from exercise. He stopped at the door of my office. Jonas was still sitting in the chair across from my desk. Ethan looked at him, then at me, then back at Jonas. Something moved behind his eyes. Shame, maybe. Or the memory of what Jonas now was and what Ethan had chosen not to be. "Can I talk to you?" Ethan said. "Alone?" Jonas stood without being asked. He put his hand on my shoulder as he passed, a gesture so small that most people would have missed it. But I did not miss it. And neither did Ethan. The door closed. My son sat in the chair across from me. The same chair where Ruth had delivered the Kensington file. The same chair where Jonas had signed the adoption papers. The same chair where Henry had drafted the will that cut my own blood out of everything I had built. Ethan put a brown envelope on my desk. "Before you say anything," he said, "I need you to look at this." I opened the envelope. Inside were printed emails, financial transfer records, a shipping manifest, and 3 photographs. The emails were between Dominic Kensington and a man named Victor Pell, a name I did not recognize. The financial records showed 2 wire transfers from a Kensington shell company to an account in Tacoma, Washington. The amounts were $12,000 and $8,500, dated 10 days and 6 days before my brake line was cut. The shipping manifest listed a delivery of marine hydraulic parts to a Tacoma address. The photographs were surveillance images, grainy but clear enough. They showed a man in a dark jacket crouching beneath a vehicle in a parking lot. The vehicle was my 22-year-old Ford truck. The parking lot was Brennan Maritime Services. The timestamp read 6:17 p.m., 83 minutes before I left the yard that Thursday night. "Where did you get these?" I asked. Ethan's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his knees to stop the tremor. "Sloane's laptop. She left it open at the apartment 2 nights ago. She was on the phone with her father in the bedroom. I saw the emails on the screen. I copied everything to a flash drive and printed it at a FedEx store on Burnside at midnight. You stole evidence from your wife's computer." "Yes. Evidence that shows her father paid someone $20,500 to cut my brake line and kill me." "Yes." The room was quiet. The grinders on Dock 6 hummed through the walls. A seagull screamed somewhere over the river. I looked at my son. Really looked at him for the first time since the wedding. His eyes were red. His jaw was clenched the way it used to clench when he was 7 years old and trying not to cry after falling off his bicycle. "Ethan, why are you here?" He took a breath that sounded like it hurt. "Because they tried to kill you, Dad. They tried to kill you, and I was part of the reason it almost happened. I brought Sloane into your life. I gave her the access code. I let them use your docks. I stood on that yacht and changed my name while they were already planning how to get rid of you. You knew about the brake line?" "No." His voice cracked. "I did not know about that. I swear to God, I did not know they would try to hurt you physically. I thought it was just business. I thought it was about money and companies and mergers. I did not think." "You did not think," I said. He flinched like I had slapped him. "No," he said quietly. "I did not think." I picked up the photographs again. The man under my truck. The timestamp. 6:17 p.m. I had been inside the office with Ruth, reviewing numbers, while someone 40 feet away was cutting the line that was supposed to end my life. "Have you talked to the FBI?" I asked. "Not yet. I came here first." "Why?" Ethan looked at his hands. The shaking had not stopped. "Because I owe you the truth before I owe it to anyone else. And because I needed to see if you would still open the door." I sat with that for a long time. The clock on my wall ticked. The tugboat outside had passed my window and disappeared upriver. The rain had started again. Light and steady, tapping against the glass like fingers asking to be let in. "Jonas," I called. The door opened. Jonas stepped in. He had been standing right outside, close enough to hear everything, far enough to give us the room. "Call Henry Tran," I said. "Tell him Ethan is here. Tell him we have evidence identifying the person who cut my brake line, including payment records traced to Dominic Kensington. Tell him Ethan wants to cooperate with the FBI." Fully. Jonas nodded and pulled out his phone. I looked at my son. "You are going to hand over everything. The flash drive, the printed emails, all of it. You are going to sit with Agent Holt and tell her every single thing you know about Kensington shipping, the docks, the smuggling, the money, and the merger plan. You are going to hold nothing back. Do you understand? Yes. And Ethan. I leaned forward. This does not fix what you broke. This is not forgiveness. This is you doing the first right thing you have done in 2 years. Do not confuse the two. He nodded. A tear rolled down his left cheek. He wiped it with the back of his hand. Fast. Like he was embarrassed it had escaped. I know, Dad, he said. I know. Outside, the Willamette kept moving. The cranes kept turning. The grinders kept grinding. And somewhere in a federal building downtown, a grand jury was about to receive the last piece of evidence it needed to bring an empire down. My son had finally come home. Not to the house in St. John's. Not to the penthouse in the Pearl District. He had come home to the truth. And the truth was sitting in a brown envelope on a scratched wooden desk in a shipyard that smelled like diesel and rain. The trial began on the second Monday of March in the Mark O. Hatfield United States Courthouse in downtown Portland. The building sits on Southwest 3rd Avenue, 8 stories of limestone and glass, the kind of structure that was designed to make you feel small when you walk through the doors. It worked. I arrived at 7:45 a.m., with Henry Tran on my left and Jonas on my right. The hallway outside courtroom 3 was already crowded. Reporters with press badges, camera crews stacked behind a roped line, federal marshals standing at every door. A woman from the Oregonian recognized me and called my name. I did not stop. Judge Margaret Chen presided. She was 61 years old, appointed to the federal bench 14 years earlier, and known throughout the district for 2 things: absolute fairness and zero tolerance for theatrics. When she entered the courtroom, every conversation stopped mid-sentence. The defendants sat at 2 separate tables. Dominic Kensington, 62, in a Navy suit that probably cost more than most of my workers earned in a month. His face was calm, controlled. The face of a man who had spent decades convincing people he was something he was not. Beside him sat his attorney, a white-haired man from a Seattle firm that charged $1,200 an hour. At the second table sat Sloane Kensington Brennan. She wore a cream blouse and no jewelry. Her hair was pulled back. She looked smaller than I remembered, like someone had let the air out of the woman who had once called my life's work quaint over a $45 glass of Sancerre. Her attorney was younger, a woman in her 30s who kept touching Sloane's arm as if to keep her from shattering. Ethan was not at the defendant's table. He sat 3 rows behind me in the gallery, wearing the same gray sweatshirt he had worn to my office 3 weeks earlier. His cooperation agreement had been finalized 9 days after he brought me the brown envelope. Full testimony in exchange for a reduced charge, 1 count of accessory to fraud, with a recommended sentence of 18 months supervised probation and 200 hours of community service. Henry had negotiated it. Agent Holt had approved it. I had said nothing. Because what a father feels about watching his son become a witness against the people who tried to kill him cannot be put into a legal document. The prosecution was led by Assistant United States Attorney David Morales. He was 43, compact, precise, the kind of man who organized his sentences the way an engineer organizes a blueprint. He stood before the jury, 12 citizens from Multnomah County, and spoke for 22 minutes without raising his voice once. He laid out the case in 4 threads. Thread 1. Smuggling. Kensington Shipping had moved undeclared hazardous industrial waste through 3 Pacific Northwest ports over a period of 19 months, using falsified customs declarations and shell companies registered in Oregon, Washington, and Nevada. Total estimated volume: 412 metric tons of material that should have been processed through licensed EPA disposal facilities. Thread 2. Money laundering. $14 million moved through a network of 7 shell companies, bouncing between domestic and offshore accounts before settling into Kensington-controlled funds. Ruth Calloway's financial analysis, submitted as Exhibit 14, traced the flow with the precision of a woman who had spent 17 years making sure every number in my company told the truth. Thread 3. Conspiracy to commit fraud. The merger plan. Emails between Dominic, Sloan, and Ethan detailing the strategy to fold Kensington Shipping into Brennan Maritime, transfer criminal liability to my company, and liquidate the combined entity for an estimated $350 million. The Monaco email Ethan's message promising his father would get nothing was displayed on the courtroom screen as Exhibit 27. I watched the jury read it. 2 of them looked at me. I kept my face still. Thread 4. Attempted murder. The brake line sabotage. Wire transfers of $12,000 and $8,500 from a Kensington Shell account to Victor Pell, a 44-year-old mechanic from Tacoma with 2 prior felony convictions. Surveillance photographs showing Pell under my truck at 6:17 p.m. in my own parking lot. Agent Holt's testimony confirming that Pell had been arrested in Tacoma 11 days after the incident and had confessed to being hired by Dominic Kensington through an intermediary. Victor Pell had already pleaded guilty. He was awaiting sentencing in a federal detention facility in SeaTac. The trial lasted 9 days. I testified on day 4. David Morales asked me to describe my business, my family, the wedding, and the night my brakes failed. I spoke for 1 hour and 40 minutes. I did not look at Dominic or Sloan while I spoke. I looked at the jury, because they were the ones who needed to understand. Henry had told me to keep it factual. I did. But facts have weight when they come from a man who built something real with his hands. I told them about the Queen Maeve, about my father fishing for 41 years, about selling the boat for $63,000 and sleeping on a cot in a rented dry dock, about hiring my first employee, and then my 50th, and then my 200th, about Maggie, about the name Brennan and what it cost to carry it honestly. When I finished, the courtroom was silent for 6 full seconds before the judge called for a recess. Ethan testified on day 6. He sat in the witness chair and answered every question Morales asked. He described the merger plan, the emails, the access code, the late-night dock operations. He confirmed that he had provided the master override code to Sloan, who passed it to her father's operatives. He confirmed that he had known about the smuggling, but not the attempted murder. His voice broke twice. Once when Morales asked him why he had gone along with the plan. "Because I wanted to be someone else," Ethan said. "And I thought their name would make me that person." The second time was when Morales asked him to identify the person who had given him everything he had ever received in his life. Ethan looked across the courtroom at me. His chin trembled. "My father," he said. "Frank Brennan." On the 9th day, Judge Margaret Chen read the verdicts. Dominic Kensington. Guilty on all 12 counts. Smuggling, customs fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and solicitation of attempted murder. Sentencing scheduled for April. Prosecution recommended 22 years. Sloan Kensington Brennan. Guilty on 8 counts. Conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, and accessory to smuggling. Sentencing recommendation: 8 years. 3 Kensington associates. Guilty on multiple counts, ranging from 6 to 14 years. Fines totaling $11.4 million. Asset forfeiture of all Kensington shipping holdings. When the verdicts were read, Dominic did not move. Sloan lowered her head to the table. Her attorney put a hand on her back. The gallery erupted in murmurs that Judge Chen silenced with a single tap of her gavel. I stood up. Jonas stood beside me. We walked out of the courthouse into the Portland rain. The reporters shouted questions. The cameras flashed. I did not stop. We got into Jonas's Honda Civic and drove back to the yard in silence. There was a propeller shaft on Dock 7 that still needed finishing. 15 months after the trial, on a Saturday morning in June, I drove to Moe's Seafood for breakfast. Not in my old truck. That one was in a federal evidence locker, tagged and photographed, and never coming back. I had bought a replacement, a 2019 Ford with 106,000 miles, a scratch on the rear bumper, and a smell of dog hair that no amount of cleaning could remove. It was not the same. Nothing ever is. But it started every morning, and the brakes worked. And after what happened on Front and Lombard, that was enough. Moe's had not changed. Same cracked vinyl booths. Same coffee that tasted like it had been brewed inside a diesel engine. Same Morris Gutierrez behind the counter, 65 now, a little grayer, still calling every customer by name before they reached the register. "Frank Brennan," Moe said. "Booth 4. Coffee is already poured." I sat down. Morning light came through the window and fell across the table in a long gold stripe. Outside, Lombard Street was waking up. A woman walked a terrier past the laundromat. A kid on a skateboard rolled through the crosswalk without looking. Ordinary things. I had learned to love ordinary things. The yard was doing well. Better than well. Jonas had taken over daily operations 14 months earlier, and Brennan Maritime Services had grown from $36.2 million in annual revenue to $41.8 million. He had landed a 5-year maintenance contract with the Port of Portland worth $6.4 million, hired 31 new employees, bringing the total to 271 upgraded electrical systems on docks 2 through 6, installed a marine hoist on Dock 9, rated for vessels up to 80 feet, and replaced every security camera in the facility with a system that could not be manually overridden by anyone, including himself. He was a better CEO than I ever was. I told him that once. He shook his head and said, "I learned from the best." I told him to stop being sentimental and go check the bilge pump on Dock 3. The Maggie Brennan Foundation had distributed its first round of grants 4 months after the trial. 45% of the company's net profits flowed into a trust, supporting families who had lost loved ones, medical bills, funeral costs, children's education, emergency housing. In its first year, the foundation helped 214 families across Oregon and Washington. Ruth Calloway managed the books because Ruth managed everything, and because she once told me the only thing she loved more than a balanced ledger was knowing the numbers meant something. Maggie would have liked that. She would have sat in this booth, drunk Moe's terrible coffee, and read every grant application herself. The foundation could not replace her. Nothing could. But it carried her name into rooms she never got to enter, and that was the closest thing to justice I knew how to build. Dominic Kensington was at FCI Sheridan, 50 miles southwest of Portland. 22 years. No parole eligibility for 18. 2 appeals filed, both denied. His shipping empire was gone, assets seized, contracts voided, licenses revoked. The name Kensington, which once opened every door from Seattle to San Francisco, now opened nothing. Sloan was at the federal prison camp in Dublin, California. 8 years. She had written Ethan 1 letter, 3 months after sentencing. 4 pages. No apology. Only blame for me, for Henry, for the FBI, for the media, for her own attorneys. She blamed everyone except the woman who had looked my son in the eye and told him his father's name was not worth keeping. Ethan did not write back. Victor Pell received 11 years for the brake line sabotage. He was in a facility in SeaTac. I did not think about him often. Some people are just tools. The hand that picks up the tool is the one that matters. The bell above Moe's door jingled at 8:15 a.m. Ethan walked in. He was different now. Not just thinner or quieter, though he was both. He was different the way metal is different after fire, harder in some places, softer in others, shaped into something that might actually hold weight. He had completed his 18 months of supervised probation and 200 hours of community service 3 months ahead of schedule. But that was not the part that mattered. 6 months after the trial, Ethan had walked into my office and asked Jonas for a job. Not a management position. Not a consulting role. A job. Jonas hired him as a dock maintenance worker at $22 an hour. Ethan showed up at 5:00 a.m. every morning. He wore steel-toed boots and a hard hat and coveralls, with the Brennan Maritime logo on the chest. He sanded hulls, replaced zinc anodes, cleaned bilge systems, and hauled anchor chains in the rain. He did not complain. He did not ask for favors. He did not mention the Kensington name or the Pearl District condo or the life he had tried to buy with someone else's identity. 3 months into the job, he went to the Multnomah County Courthouse and legally changed his name back. Not to Ethan Kensington Brennan. Just Ethan Brennan. The way it was when Maggie held him in the hospital and whispered it for the first time. He slid into the booth across from me. Mo brought him coffee without being asked. Ethan wrapped both hands around the mug, the way I always did, the way his mother always did. "Morning, Dad," he said. "Morning." We did not talk about the trial. We did not talk about the yacht, or the emails, or the brake line, or the certificate that started everything. We talked about the weather. We talked about a hull repair on Dock 11 giving the crew trouble. We talked about a Mariners game that went 14 innings. We talked about Mo's coffee, which Ethan said tasted like motor oil, and I told him it always had. And that was the point. At 9 a.m., Ethan reached for the check first. He put down a 20 and told Mo to keep the change. Mo looked at me. I shrugged. We walked outside. The sun was out, which in Portland in June meant it would last until 3 p.m. before the clouds returned. Ethan's truck, a used Toyota bought with his own money, was parked next to mine. "See you at the yard?" he said. "I will be there by 10. He nodded, opened his door, then stopped. "Dad." "Yeah, thank you for opening the door." I looked at my son, Ethan Brennan, dock worker, 37 years old, hands finally learning what calluses felt like. A name he had thrown away and picked back up and was now carrying the way it was meant to be carried. Not like a trophy, but like a tool. Something you grip and use and wear down and sharpen and pass to the next person when your hands get too tired. "That is what fathers do," I said. He drove toward the yard. I stood in the parking lot, sun on my face. Somewhere on the Willamette, a boat horn sounded. Low and long and steady, the kind of sound that has echoed off the water since before any of us were born and will keep echoing long after we are gone. I got in my truck and followed my son to work.